Okay. Hey, everyone. We'll just wait probably 2 minutes, 3 minutes, just for people to get sorted, get on. I have you all muted just because the nature of what this is. And so if there's any issues or anything, please let me know via the chat. Hold on.
Just waiting. I don't see Obama logged in yet. So
He'll be here shortly. He'll be here shortly. I know you promoted it, so you have some pretty big followers, Jesse. If anyone has any ideas for intro music, would love. Clearly we need some for next time. Okay, guys, I think we're gonna get started. This is like so exciting. I've never done this before. This is obviously not my first Zoom, but it is my first Zoom host situation. So I am so thrilled to see all of you. I have you all muted because of the nature of what this is. You will have the opportunity to ask questions at the end. You can also raise your hand at the end when I open it up and I can call on you. Bear with me because this is my first. So let me just kick things off with a quick introduction on what this is. So hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever Digital Campfire download. So who am I and what are Digital Campfires? So for those of you who don't know me, I see some people I don't know here, which is fantastic. My name is Sarah Wilson. I'm a digital strategist in LA. I used to work at Facebook and Instagram, and I was a journalist before that. In early February, I wrote this piece in which I described a phenomena in which younger audiences were retreating from social platforms, bigger sort of public-facing social platforms, to more closed communities, smaller closed communities, based on private messaging or micro interests or shared experiences. Think things like Instagram Threads or Facebook Messenger or Fortnite, things like that. I called those smaller communities digital campfires, and that was really just a way of naming what was already happening. Then the coronavirus hit, and overnight, digital campfires exploded into our everyday. They kind of went from like this fun diversion to a lifeline. Think things like Zoom happy hours, like everybody's now experiencing them daily. So I'm watching the series to find out what distinguishes a great digital campfire from a so-so one. How do you build one? So everyone's clamoring to join it. How do you keep it going, especially in this utterly crazy time with so much uncertainty, but also beyond? So I'm excited to welcome my first guest, but first, a little bit of housekeeping, which I spoke to before, but if you just joined, as I said, I've muted all of you. So if you can't talk, that's why. This is going to go on about 35 minutes, and then you'll have the chance to ask questions at the end. When I open it up to questions, feel free to raise your hand via the raise hand feature, and I will call on you. You can also ask questions via chat, and I'm going to read them to our guests. I may not get to all of them. This will be recorded, so keep in mind that if you speak, you're going to be on the recording. Now I'd love to introduce our guests. So let me just, you guys can share, hold on, you sharing my screen. All right, not sure why that's, hold on one second, stop share. Give me 1 second. Not sure why I can't share. I'm sorry, guys. It's not here. Hold on. For whatever reason, I can't share it, but hopefully I'll work it out. So I will launch right in. I'm so thrilled to be able to welcome the creative geniuses behind one of my favorite ever digital campfires, Overheard. So Overheard has become shorthand for, I would say, kind of a specific brand of, let's call it bullshit-free, socially critical humor about the idiosyncrasies of local people and places in ways that are like as hilarious as they are intimate. Overheard launched in 2016, which, as we all know, is about 1,000 years ago in internet years. It launched as a parody account featuring snippets of conversation overheard in LA. And it's exploded into a wildly popular Instagram-based empire with millions of followers across 8 accounts in 4 cities that happen to be among the most highly engaged on Instagram, which we'll take a look if I can figure out how to share my screen. They count some of the biggest names on the planet among their followers, like J-Lo, Demi Lovato, and even Mayor Eric Garcetti follows you guys on Overheard LA, which I'm wondering like to what extent that's impacting the current situation, which is fabulous. Overheard crosses over into all 3 categories of campfire that I identified: private messaging, micro interest, and shared experiences, which is no easy feat. I'm psyched to talk to them about how they started their campfire and keep it going in these unprecedented times. So please welcome Jessie Margolis, the founder, and Bridget Berman, the head of brand partnerships from Overheard. Hey, you guys should be able to unmute yourselves. Hey.
Hello.
Hi, Bridget, Jessie, welcome.
Hello, strangers and friends.
Thank you so much for being here. So I had so many questions for you, but I really do want to start at the beginning because I don't know that a ton of people know exactly how you started Overheard. So Jessie, let's start with you. You started in August 2015. Was it from the patio, like at Erewhon? Take us back. I want to hear like the inception story.
Yeah, so I wasn't really particularly active on social media, and I was one of those people that, you know, I was at a point in my life where I was like, oh, had I started my life over, I would have done X, Y, and Z, and was quite unhappy in my career. Or I didn't really have a career, but I was basically like I jumped around from different jobs and stuff like that. Oh,
there it is. I'm getting you back.
Amazing. And my friends made me an Instagram account. At the time, the Fat Jewish was very popular, so they made me an Instagram account called Thin Jewish, and I started to kind of goof around on it and do little like dumb creative exercises. Like I would make emoji book covers, or I would take pictures of my latte foam and do like Rorschach tests. Anyway, and I would just, it was kind of like a creative outlet for my 300 followers. And then I was sitting at Erewhon at one of the tables, and I heard these 2 women having just the stupidest, most entertaining conversation. And, you know, for anyone that's lived in a city, you know, observed, you know, sat on a train, just kind of, you know, had that moment where someone else's life and narrative is imbued upon you. I just wrote it down because it was so dumb, and I posted it on my private Instagram. And instead of getting like 14 likes, I got like 35 likes. So I did that for like I did that for like a week. And then my friend, who's a screenwriter, he was just very into it, and he's like, you need to make an account. So I took the sort of 7 posts I had, locked myself in the house for the weekend, and kind of came up with what this thing would be. And that was the sort of like, you know, text only on a visual platform, no gossip, no politics, no religion, no sort of like sneaky tricks like hashtags and, you know, following and unfollowing. It just this kind of like thing. And I just did it because I was, you know, very creatively pent up. I call it like a primal squeak. I was just like, yeah. So that's how it started.
And I think you've told me before that you've mentioned this phrase, like you wanted it to be a mirror of the city. And when you went to that sort of second phase, can you talk a little bit about that? Like what does that mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was, you know, born in New York, but raised here. And I'm from LA, and, you know, like we're New Yorkers from LA. And what I wanted it to be was something where you could look at it and, you know, your first thing is you're laughing at, you know, the inherent absurdity of LA, which is always ever changing, but consistent. But then at at some moment you might recognize yourself.
Mm-hmm.
How LA has, whether you've been here for a week or a year or your whole life, started to inform a little bit of how, you live in an absurd way. So I wanted it
Right.
to be something that didn't have a persona behind it, and really was a sort of reflection or cultural mirror.
Right. So this cultural mirror. And then Bridget, you joined in, was it 2017?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So your role, your actual title is head of brand partnerships, but I feel like that doesn't really speak to what you are and the degree to which you've helped infuse the voice of the brand. Can you speak to that a little bit? What does it mean, and how does it help to sort of inform what Overheard is?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of different things. We're still kind of trying to figure out also what Overheard looks like just beyond an Instagram account. So my job is really kind of helping take the brilliant ideas floating around in Jesse's head and making it come to life, whatever that means. We launched a newspaper. I know you're going to get into that, but like that was one day we're at Noya House working and Jesse's like, I have a good idea. Let's make a newspaper. I was like, what? But I mean, he's brilliant. So then we went and we did that. So kind of my job is about, brand partnerships, but also like, what are we and how can we get weird things done?
Right. Okay. Well, we'll definitely speak to that later. I want to ask, because the sort of subject of this whole thing is really about community and building community. So a lot of brands and a lot of media organizations talk about building community, and I think that's kind of an empty word. I like to look at what's behind it. What's behind it is like actual people. And when I'm assessing the strength of a community, I look at usually three things. How deeply are people actually engaged with your content? How much are they paying attention? How emotionally invested are people in you? And how essential are you to people's lives? And so I want to walk through those three things. And the first, when I look at your metrics, I pulled some from CrowdTangle, which is a service that helps kind of look at who's doing what. And I put you up against some different meme accounts, but also like randomly Justin Bieber, just because I thought it would be helpful for people to see. This is interaction rate, i.e. engagement rate. When we talk about how much are people actually taking an action on your content, liking, commenting, sharing. And when I think about my own behavior with Overheard, I can name at least 10 people who I've sent Overheard content to in the last month. And I'm on a bunch of text threads that just naturally Overheard stuff comes up because it's become such a shorthand. So I guess my question is, like, it's not easy to capture attention and build real community in this current climate, but you've done that. Why do you think that is? What do you think is resonating?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's important to say that the idea worked from the beginning. And, I'm not even taking credit for that. I just mean whatever it was, when it happened, the medium it happened on, it just worked. And we didn't really mess with that. Sorry. So, I think if I'd launched it on Twitter or Facebook, like we wouldn't be sitting here right now having this conversation because, Instagram was just such an important platform, and Instagram really enshrines content and makes it feel more special. Whereas, your uncle could write like, a 8-paragraph flat earth essay on Facebook and no one would read it.
Shut up. My uncle totally wrote one and it was very well received.
Yeah. But I do think, we did something from the beginning that worked and we didn't screw it up. And so I think that's part of the reason it resonates. I also think, it's UGC. I mean, at least 90% of it is UGC. So
can you just say what obviously most people will know what that is? That's user generated content for people who don't know.
Universal basic income. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, I took my first submission after like a month, and we credit people in the caption, and sometimes it's anonymous, and inevitably people will cheat or think it's fake, or it's not a journalistic enterprise, but it inhabits. I mean, truth inhabits it, and so it's got this thing where basically it's the writer's room of LA or the writer's room of New York, and how we interact at the grocery store, at parties, at work, on dates, in restaurants and bars. It's coming from the city. And so I think inevitably people are going to be more connected to it. There might be a meme account that's more popular than ours, that's an aggregator, and people might love the content, but I don't think they feel a connection to the meme account the way they might to Overheard, because it's sort of just like this psychological billboard for the the zeitgeist of the city.
A psychological billboard for the zeitgeist of the city. I like that. I like that. I mean, what?
It doesn't make any sense, but you get what I'm saying.
No, I think it does make sense. And I think what you're speaking to is an emotional investment that people have. And I think that kind of speaks to the next point on sort of how I look at really robust communities. Do people have an emotional connection? How invested emotionally are people in your thing that you do? In your case, it's great snippets of conversation. And I think people are invested in many different ways, actually. Do you think that's true? And if so, like, what are you seeing? Bridget, could you speak to that? Because I know you're, on those comments daily, you're seeing what comes in from the DMs.
Yeah, people, it's now, like you said, it's a word that people use. It's a common phrase. That was overheard. People are texting like, oh, that's such an overheard. And then as well as like the DMs that we get, people are DMing us, telling us that like we've made their year if they get posted. And, one girl tweeted her DMs with us, and it was just like, finally Overheard in LA responded. It was just like a ha 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 from us, and she was like the happiest person on earth. So it definitely makes people really happy to be credited.
Not just credited, but also to share. Like what I found is people telling me, oh my God, that's so me. Or it's a signaling mechanism like, oh, I'm cool enough to know who these people are and to show that I'm not one of them, or I'm self-effacing or sort of self-deprecating enough to be able to admit that I am one of them. So either way, it feels like an emotional connection that people have.
Yeah, and there's also like a little system to it. The way Instagram's set up, it's like, you see the geotag. So you're like, oh, do I know that place? Okay, so I know Justa. I've been to Justa, or I live in, Minneapolis, and I've been wanting to go to Justa because I'm a foodie, or, whatever it is. And then you see the quote, and then you look down, like, do I know that person? There's some other information. It's a woman to a son. You know what I mean? So it becomes this sort of like 8-second sitcom that you, and oftentimes people think it's them or they've had a similar experience. So yeah, I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah, Bridget, didn't you say that you were at the PT the other day and someone repeated and overheard back to you?
Yeah, there have been several times. This has happened to both Jesse and myself, where like we got on the account because someone actually overheard us and DM'd us something I said to Jesse or Jesse said to someone. And then also the other day I was at physical therapy, and my physical therapist told me a story that one of her patients told her that he read from the account that actually happened to a friend of mine. So it's just full circle.
Right, it comes back. It seems like the community build is actually playing a role of connecting people to each other, which is what is part of what makes a great campfire, because it serves a purpose. And I guess that gets into the last kind of point of that I raised about sort of how essential are you in people's lives. I'm curious to know really how the content that you've done in the last few weeks has been received. I know you've done some stuff related to coronavirus support and outreach, and how has your strategy shifted or changed, and how have you figured that out in such a short period of time?
Yeah, so when this first happened, like obviously, not to get into broader issues, but you tend to, you think about yourself, how's this going to affect my life, my job? And then you think about the world, and then you think about the future. And at first I was like, we're a digital company. This doesn't mean anything to us. This could strengthen us. Thank God we don't, we haven't had to lay anyone off. And we have a team of 7. So we're not a huge company, but, it's real people with health insurance. And then I started to, like, the content was so good for the first few weeks of March, as people weren't in complete quarantine, but we were going through the process of slowly shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, no one can overhear anything. And, you know, and so what we've tried to do is, you know, embrace the idea of a home submission, you know, Zoom submissions, things like that. We've started to, you know, we've done some fun charity things. We've started to experiment with going live. So like, we're doing it again tomorrow, but last week we went live for half an hour, and, you know, instead of a person, we had a whiteboard, and it had instructions. Bridget did the whole thing, but basically it instructed people to join our live feed, do jumping jacks for 10 seconds while screaming "fuck you," and we'll donate $20 to, you know, healthcare heroes for each person that joins. So, you know, we've always had two voices. We have the Overheard feed, which never changes. And then we have our stories and our newspapers and other content where we do like horoscopes and interviews and misconnections and other type of stuff, which is probably seen more by people who are, you know, diehards of the account. So I think we're having to learn how to stretch that voice a little bit. You know, we have a text community that we send out like quarantine thoughts of the day to. Bridget can speak to a few more things. We're sending out a quarantine kit. And considering doing monthly kits that are, you know, bringing together businesses in each city to sort of, you know, entertain and reward people at home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we're really trying to focus on what you said with the community aspect of this and how everyone's really in this together. So we shifted kind of from what Jesse said was, you know, the content was so great to kind of now like, okay, we're stuck in this. So we're doing a lot of like UGC contests and gathering a bunch of stuff. We did like a roast on like your work from home station, which like kind of was just cute and fun. So we're just trying to kind of collect, you know, things from everyone and make everyone know that they're in this together, and also have like this giving back component. So again, like really trying to build community with our different cities and accounts.
I feel like you were really primed to do that because people are already sharing your content. And so when you went live, for example, to do like the jumping jack fuck you thing, the response you got was like, holy shit, I can't believe this. This is like my favorite brand is doing this and they're going above and beyond. Like it was a creative kind of new thing from a brand that they were already familiar with and love. So yeah.
Well, it's that, and also everyone, you know, all these celebrities and accounts are going live, and they're just used to seeing someone cook in their kitchen and teach a recipe or talk with someone. You know, it's pretty all the same. So I think it was refreshing to see like this popular Instagram account make people do the weirdest stuff for charity. It's refreshing.
That's interesting. One of the things I talk about when you're thinking about building community is really about being specific and knowing who you're for and really delivering content for them. I think you guys are a little different because you're seemingly for a broad swath of people, but for whatever reason, it feels like whenever I see a piece of content, it feels like you're speaking directly to me. And I know a lot of people feel that way when they read your stuff, and it's part of the reason you're so successful. So can you speak to that? Like, how do you nail that, really walk that line, really?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like we do a good job of curating. You know? Like the one thing that hasn't changed from the time that I started the accounts is that I obsess over, at least LA and New York, not so much the accounts, but like I obsess over what we post. That can have, you know, negative effects too, but like we really care. I tend to also use our Twitter account as like, I don't even think it works, but I tend to post stuff on Twitter first to see if it resonates. Also, I think like, while we may all be very original and unique, we're not necessarily, our lives aren't as original as we think they are.
Right.
And, you know, we're all struggling or placed in a certain, you know, I'm sure you're noticing it now that life's on hold, like just how absurd life in LA or New York or any major city is, where of course you're unique in your thoughts and your DNA and the specifics of who's in your life, but we're all, you know, in the same culture of, you know, spending too much money on this and banging our heads against the wall, trying to date this, and stuck, you know, I mean, like I never worked in a paper company, but like I really related to the office, just because I've sat, you know, around terrible people and been stuck. So I hope in some way we're just hitting on common themes of the way we eat, the way we date, the way we work, our health obsessions,
Right.
things like that.
Right. It seems to me that it's certain themes for a very specific audience, like an audience of, you know, intelligent, culturally savvy people who live in urban centers. So it actually is quite specific, even though it's on Instagram, it's public facing, it's technically for broad, anyone could follow it. But it is actually a very specific audience now that I think about it. So it's interesting that you say that.
Yeah, and part of me always wished that it had gotten more diverse, but it's ultimately, you know, it's populated by, I mean, it's been directed by the people that have contributed, and also by the nature of Instagram. You know what I mean? Like some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen is on Twitter, and most people don't care because it's on Twitter. So, you know, the audience has defined itself in certain ways, and while I wish we, you know, I wish we had a little bit more of a diverse take. Like New York is a little bit more diverse than LA, our account. But yeah, it's sort of designed itself in the.
Yeah, so maybe you could speak a little bit to, okay, you started Instagram, it's an Instagram-centric brand, but you guys have done all these other brand extensions. I'll flash forward to the newspaper, which you mentioned. You actually, for those of you guys who don't know, they actually put out several newspapers. And I'd love you to also speak about the texting stuff you're doing, because this is like, the Instagram is just one piece of this growing empire. So if you could speak to that in more detail, that'd be great.
Yes, I mean, it was dumb before the quarantine, and now it's just really dumb with newspapers, but it was so much fun. So, you know, one of the challenges with our brand is that, you know, unlike a meme account or a person, there are really an unlimited amount of things you could do with it. Like you could create merchandise, you can create digital video, you could do, you know, podcasts in each city, you could create a newsletter product. Like there's 12 to 14 extensions. And so we've struggled and iterated through it, and we've been very fortunate that we have a handful of brands that have basically funded us the way, you know, startup money would have funded us. So we were able to mess around a little bit. The newspaper was meant to be, you know, we're really obsessed with analog mediums where we can impose this, you know, digital world. So this had 3 points of distribution last year. This was our LA paper, and it contained like Millennial Weather Report. I've got it right here.
Yeah.
We had like hashtag ads on the back.
Yep.
And then inside, oh, you've got it. All right.
Yep.
Yeah, so it was a combination of, you know, we had like a hashtag crossword, a food review, crystal of the month, all that kind of stuff. And it was sort of more, it wasn't like The Onion, it was more observational. But basically we had influencers handing it out for the weekend. We seeded it at like 50 of like the coolest offices, you know, like WME, and sent it to Netflix and, you know, all those places. And then like it was also sitting at about 80 of the trendier spots like Intelligentsia and Justa and places like that.
It's interesting because we're all living online. We are, you know, obviously obsessed with our devices. And when we think about community, typically now the thinking is it's all digital. And the reality is we spend a lot of our lives offline too. I mean, it's hard to remember that time pre-quarantine, but I really love the way that you guys have doubled down on IRL experiences like this. But how key do you think it's been to your overall like development of your community to have both? And maybe Bridget, you could speak to this a little, because I know that's been something you've worked on as well.
I'm curious to hear Jesse's answer first, to be honest.
Okay, Jesse, go for it.
Well, I mean, for us, the newspaper was a photo op with substance, right? So the whole point was that people would take pictures with, you know, our New York newspaper said digital is dead on the cover. And so for me, it's you know, people would always talk about that IRL to URL loop. And so we were just trying to do something unique. and also use it as a way to kind of define who we were, like to sort of just flex and say like, you know, Overheard is more than an Instagram account. You know, we also make these for a company called Lalabo. We make 2 or 3 of them a year, and we make about 80,000 of them. It sits in 70 stores. So there are some brand extensions as well. I don't know if I answered your question though, because I'm in quarantine.
It's cool. I think you did. I mean, I think it's about you're designing these offline experiences to actually be symbiotic with online. I mean, you're designing them to be shared. You're designing them to have this relevance, but kind of pop in a new way. When you say influencers distributed them, which influencers? Because I know you constantly make fun of influencers. So were you enlisting influencers that you are, you know, sending up?
No, we couldn't really afford them. They were like
Okay.
$1,000 micro influencers.
Like micro.
They were models. They were models with some influence.
Influencers, but we had them on like bird scooters as like
Okay.
paper boys. And you know, like, sorry, this was our Labo paper.
Okay, great. Like the Fiji water girl, like that level?
Yeah. But,
Remember, guys, the Fiji water girl.
and I'll be honest, Bridget was pretty hardcore at running and handing out the papers. I was surprised
Oh yeah.
I took them.
I love it. How have you seen the community you've built grow and change since the inception? I mean, since 4 years ago. I mean, 4 years ago in internet time, like I said, is like 100,000 years ago. So how have you seen what you've done, not just what you've done, but how the response has been and how the community has changed in turn?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I think to an extent it's less cool. You know what I mean? Like Instagram's been around for a while, so it's less edgy. And, you know, I think there's a certain fatigue around just like how much. So, you know, all the stuff you guys have heard before about just people wanting more real things, less filtered life. You know, we never changed that like terrible white square that I make in notes and filter. Like we never made it fancy or anything like that.
Right.
But I'm not really sure. You know, I'm curious to know what you or Bridget think. Like,
I mean, I would argue kind of it's too cool now. There's like there's too much. So you have to really find what you like and then the accounts around that. There's too much, I think.
You mean there's too much on Instagram? There's too much content, not
Correct.
only on Instagram, TikTok, everything.
Yeah.
Right. And so do you think in that way that what you've created has become kind of an island in sort of like a respite? I know that's and I sort of ask that question as I think about what it's done for me. When I think about when I land on a piece of Overheard content, it makes me feel like I'm alone on an island, a really fucking funny island, watching some great little one-act play unfold. And it's just a moment of pure reflection and fun in a total morass of content, like a mess of content. And I know I feel that's why I share it, because it's like it made me delighted for the moment. And I don't know that changes. Like I think that stayed pretty consistent.
Absolutely. I mean, you sound like a big fan, and I love that.
I
think
clearly am a fan.
So am I.
Right.
I think there's a lot of accounts out there though doing it in a great way, and so it's just hard, you know, to keep being that for people. But yeah, I feel like people feel the same way. Like the super fans feel the same way as you. So I hope that, you know, more and more people can feel that way.
Have you seen your engagement spike in the last month or flatten? Like what's been the response, not just from the new content you've been doing, but to the fact that everybody has now been held captive inside their homes and much more on their screens?
We've seen it spiked in March through the roof, and in April it's regressed. And you know, who knows what those ding dongs with the algorithms do, but my hunch is that
those ding dongs.
You know, Instagram is tethered to experience. And also like when you're in your work mode, you're like, you have a certain amount of time to look at things in the digital space. Whereas now, you know, I played a game called Virus yesterday, which is basically mafia. My friend invented it, and I spent 2 hours on a Zoom call. So I think people are, you know, at first I was like, oh, this is a gift, you know, like, you know, we're a digital company, everything's digital now, but it's also so much more crowded. You might be watching, you know, Escape from Dannemora sitting on your couch for 7 hours.
Right.
You might be FaceTiming with 3 of your friends getting drunk or working. So I just think that it's a more crowded landscape.
Right.
There's also less, you know, people are really invested in showing the dumb shit that they do in their life on Instagram.
Right.
And they're not able to do that much dumb stuff right now.
I disagree. I feel like there's a lot of dumb shit happening on my Instagram live right now.
I know you made banana bread, so no offense, but you know, I live near LACMA and the lights are empty.
Right, I see. So there's nowhere to go outside to do the pink wall. If you're not in LA, they're, you know, taking pictures on the pink wall.
The concert you were at, or the trip that you were on.
Right.
You know, so I think that's part of it.
Right.
There was also a giant spike. There was a giant spike in like the most creative content the internet has seen. And so, I mean, it was amazing, the end of March. And then it kind of just like, everyone's like, okay, how much longer? And now I'm over posting stuff and now I want to get off my phone. And
right. And there's an exhaustion.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, I want to go ahead and open it up to questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and do my very best to do this. So people who are listening in, you should have the option to raise your hand, or you can ask a question via the chat. I do see one that's come up in the chat, so I will start with that one, but you should also be able to hit raise hand, and then I'll call on you to actually to speak. So this one's from Ellie. Hi, Ellie. Have you ever seen an account or platform that's highly engaged and was completely organic, then introduce a product launch or commercial aspect? You know what? I don't actually know what this question quite means, but I'm going to unmute you to ask it because I want you to actually ask it in a better way. So can you go ahead and ask it, Ellie?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Yeah, so this is for Jesse or Bridget or you, Sarah, of just, you know, if there's a platform or an account that's been created much like yours, I'm actually interested in how you guys monetize, but even without going there, the idea of launching something, a product, like a commercial product, a consumer good that is very tied to the account, that doesn't feel opportunistic, that doesn't feel totally commercial. Like, have you ever seen anyone do that well?
I don't know. We didn't get to the way we monetize, which I actually think is.
Yeah, let's have you talk to that just quickly first, because I think it would be really helpful to know.
Well, we monetize in 2 ways. One is just, you know, standard ads. You know, we're very selective about who we work with because we have the luxury to be, but, you know, we'll post about a Netflix show or, you know, it's a lot of entertainment heavy stuff on our channels, but we have 3 branded accounts, Overheard Lalabo, Overheard Bumble, and Overheard Uber, which are all complete brand partnerships where we have like Uber has 525,000 followers that are real followers. And we've built that account in the last 18 months. So those are the 2 ways we monetize. Like, when you're talking about a merchandise product, or you're talking about some type of an extension?
Hold on one sec.
There you go. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a merchandise product. And I can just give an example of this, like, sort of specific of a pet account that's done really well. It's just one of these like highly popular celebrity pets that after years of being just a great and adorable pet launches a line. Has anyone seen that happen?
I feel like that in of itself wasn't overheard.
There you go. Yeah, the celebrity pet just launches his own line, but some sort of consumer product, like, you know, it's just something that's come up in my professional life.
Yeah. There's a couple that come to mind. Well, so there's the obvious ones that we all hate, the Babe Rose, you know, the What Do You Mean? I think those are the standard bearers of like, this is how we really successfully monetized our audience.
Yeah.
Can you just explain, because What Do You Meme is the meme game, the actual analog game that came out of, was it Fuck Jerry?
Yeah, and they have like games now, and I think that's where they make the bulk of their money. And then the Fat Jewish and several other people created that rosé. I think We're Not Really Strangers, our friend Kareen,
That's what I was going to say.
has an account called We're Not Really Strangers, which is, sort of all about human connection, and she has a game. And so I think that's been a sort of elegant rollout, but in terms of like a real brand where you're like, no, I mean, to be honest, I don't consume that stuff. It's also a big question we're asking right now because we have a lot of ideas. And, some of them I don't want to say out loud, but you can picture them. And I assume we're excluding books and, low-hanging fruit like that.
Right. It could definitely tread on commercial.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really helpful.
Top of my head. I mean, there's some clothing stuff that's really cool that's come out, and there's some
sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I like to think about you've built this base of fans. People are hopefully obsessed with this character or whatever it is you do. In the case of Overheard, it's obsessed with the content. What is it that they want? Like, what would actually benefit their lives? And I think especially in a time like this, when people are looking to brands to provide, I think, a lot of the guidance or the support or the help that perhaps government is not, or just because the world feels very out of control, it is actually a great opportunity for a brand to come in and go like, here's the thing that I'm going to help you with. Yeah. And, it's performing a service. It's not just marketing to me. And I think consumers now are really much more savvy, even than they were 2 months ago, and looking for that to be fulfilled. So I think it's a cool opportunity.
There is one that gets mentioned in every marketing meeting on the planet, but it is a real example, which is Glossier, which started as a blog, and is now, $1 billion company.
Yep, I hadn't even considered them. Yeah, it's a good point.
So, I mean, that is one that I think is really tangible, where these were interviews and ideas, and then it's really a product.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, of course. Does anyone else have questions or just stuff you guys want to talk about that's come up today? You can chat, you can raise your hand. No? Nothing? Okay. Was there anything I didn't touch on? I feel like there's so much. Oh, Sam. Yes. Sam.
How's it going? I'm curious to hear if you've played around at all with the idea of creating sort of like private virtual spaces. Like Slack is sort of the obvious example, but it's meant for workplaces. Have you thought about like either Facebook groups and taking the idea of purely user-generated content and letting the community kind of run wild with one another, which is to say, right now, it's a lot of UGC that you then curate. Is there a concept of just bringing people together into a sort of more pure campfire space?
I mean, well, two things. One, like, we're definitely, as everyone is, trying to figure out how we can create an online space right now that, feels true to the Overheard brand, but can be a living thing. In terms of like the Slack or Facebook thing, like my initial thought is like how unfunny people are, like, and also how much funnier things are when they're happening versus when you share them, as I'm sure all of us have tried to tell a really funny story and been like, okay, I swear this really was hilarious when I spilled up my $12 Blackberries all over this, Schaefer's t-shirt.
Which you did 5 seconds before this interview.
It's not funny now when I'm talking about it. So I do worry about the sort of like polluting of it. I'm going to have an allergy sneeze in a second, which is not COVID, but.
Bless you.
Bridget taught me how to sneeze a couple of years ago, by the way. That's the right way. I tend to think, and maybe I'm cynical, like, I just think people aren't that funny. I think some people are hilarious. But like when you just have the masses, like if you look at our submissions, it's like 80 dumb things, 10 funny things. So I worry about that. But in terms of creating like a way to meet up or a way to be silly together or a way to share, 100%.
Right. And that's something you guys are thinking through, whether it's comedy shows or in-person meetups of some kind.
I mean, if you guys aren't bored, just very quickly, we had a really great idea that we were obsessed with, which doesn't happen that often, but it's now no longer relevant. But we were going to be doing, starting in June, a pop-up sort of overheard comedy experience that was also going to be a podcast, and it would pop up at a different restaurant or weird cheesy cafe every month. So it might be at like, about wannabe screenwriters, and we would do it at like Aroma Cafe one month. And it might be about foodies, and we would do it at Major Domo and interview David Chang the next month. So we're trying to figure out, how we could take something like that and do it virtually. But no, I'd never actually, like the original Overheard website, which we had no knowledge of or understanding of, but was around since like 2005, I think was very much like what you're talking about, where you could just directly upload.
It was like a forum.
So for everybody's info, there was and maybe still is Overheard. Was it like a blog, like early Web 1.0? What is a website? Yeah.
There'll be like, there was this, it was on Instagram. It was
right.
like, what was it? It was, yeah.
Right. Right. But you basically took the concept, made it Instagram-y, supercharged it, and created a community. And that's no small feat.
Very, very differently. But I do remember looking at that in 2016 and freaking out and being like, oh God. But the way it was done was, it very much fit, the time when you'd be stuck in front of your desktop,
right,
and write longer things. And, so it's an interesting idea.
Yeah. Thanks for your question, Sam. Does anyone else have any questions or just thoughts they want to share about any of this that we've talked about today?
Any ideas we can steal from you?
Yeah, any ideas they can steal / collaborate with you on? Okay, well, if you do, please chat me via the chat or raise your hand. And if not, I'm probably going to wind this down and just thank you guys so much. If you want more information on the next episode of this, where I'll actually be featuring somebody from community.com who are building the text platform that you guys are on. I don't know if you guys have seen celebrities communicating directly with their fans. They're doing it on Community. And so I'll be having somebody, Molly DeWolf-Swenson, on from that platform. But that's next week. I'm so thrilled you guys could join us and just talk all about the digital campfire you've built. Thank you so much, Bridget and Jesse. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And thank you guys all for joining. This is my first go, so really happy. Take care, guys.